In today's video, we're taking a look at some NHL trade rumors focusing on the Calgary Flames, Edmonton Oilers, and the Nashville Predators. Plus, we have some schedule changes for the big Lake Tahoe outdoor event. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about here today. I want to look at some trade rumors, but first up, I have some updates here on the outdoor event at Lake Tahoe. It looks like a beautiful start here to the game with Vegas and Colorado, but unfortunately, after the first period, the NHL has just announced that they will be postponing the remainder of the game. Now, this video is probably going to be a little bit going up on YouTube, so obviously the game would have been delayed by a couple of hours by the time you're actually watching this, but the ice was just not holding up due to the severe sun that they were getting. Generally, the sun and nice weather is not an issue in most cases, but the clouds were covering a big chunk of the sky, but just not the sun, and it's just wreaking havoc on the ice. So they've decided that after the first period where the Avs have a 1-0 lead, they're going to postpone the rest of the game until 9 o'clock local time. That's 9 o'clock Pacific, midnight Eastern. So for you East Coasters like myself, if you want to watch the rest of this game, it's going to be a late night. And they also already went ahead and changed the schedule for tomorrow's game between the Bruins and the Flyers. They was supposed to be an early afternoon affair like we had today, and they've bumped that back to 7 o'clock Eastern time as well to avoid the sun issues that they're having today, because the weather tomorrow is looking like the sun could be even more of a problem than it was today. So the ice was going to be severely impacted. So obviously the NHL for the most part has had pretty good luck with their outdoor events and haven't really had to do a whole lot of this kind of stuff. They played in rain and snow, etc. But I mean, it's a beautiful day out there. The sun's just wreaking havoc, but beautiful scenery. Obviously, beautiful backdrop there. I don't think the NHL is by any means done with this concept. I think we will see more from it here in the next few years, preferably with fans in attendance. Obviously, the NHL is kind of doing this as a way to make a nice made-for-TV event, I guess you could say, with some beautiful scenery. But ideally, before I think we see another one of these, they're obviously be pushing it into next year or the year after when there can be fans and they can, obviously plan ahead here. But it's a beautiful concept. Many of us grew up playing hockey in outdoor rinks, and it's nice to see something different than the Stadium Series. So we'll stay tuned about how they proceed here, and hopefully they can get the rest of this game done this evening without any further issues, and then tomorrow. But obviously doing it later with the lights and everything, it should be fine. I would think they'll have a much easier time maintaining the ice. Now, as I mentioned, I want to take a look at some NHL trade rumors focusing on 3 teams today, and I want to start with the Nashville Predators, or a team that's been up a lot in the news cycle here lately after a lot of talk that they're likely heading down the road of a rebuild, or at the very least a big reset. We've seen comments recently as well from the CEO of the Predators talking about how they're very disappointed with the team's results, and this is not what they envisioned. They envisioned this roster being a lot better and getting a lot better results, and they're ready to accept some changes. To kind of what I've took from the comments here from the CEO. Obviously, David Poile, there's no real reason to think he's necessarily in trouble. He's been there a very long time, the only GM in Preds history. I do wonder, though, if he's the right guy to take them through a rebuild, if they indeed go down that road. But at this point, they have a variety of players that I think they're definitely going to listen on and likely move if the right deal comes along. I mean, the main name that's been coming up is Mattias Ekholm, and not that they're really pushing hard to shop him just yet, but many NHL insiders feel like he's going to be probably one of their players to garner the most attention, given the fact that he's a solid, he's a solid top 4D. He's got a great contract, and the Nashville Predators, not only would they be looking to do this possibly for changing things up, but they're also going to be likely looking at this from an expansion draft perspective as well. The Preds are likely not going to want to protect 4D, and if they don't do that, they're going to protect 3, which leaves them with Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis being the top 2, and you would think that because of cap considerations as well, they would likely protect the youngster Dante Fabro over Ekholm, at least you would think. I mean, they could leave Ellis exposed, but I'd be quite surprised if they did. So Ekholm very well could be the odd man out in that scenario, and they could seek a trade regardless, even if they were doing better. It would come a little bit later, though, in the offseason. But Ekholm's a guy who's obviously going to generate a ton of interest because he's got this year and next, with only $3.7 million on his deal. So, top 4 guy, can log a lot of minutes, get a lot of experience. He's had some playoff runs in him. So, he's a guy that's going to generate a lot of interest. Now, Pierre LeBrun has an Athletic article where he proposes 4 different destinations where he feels would be a good fit. So, I just want to take a look at these teams that he's proposing here and see where we think is a good landing spot for him. Now, the first one is the Boston Bruins. As I mentioned before, the Bruins are a team that keeps coming up. Obviously, they're a team that has not really addressed the left side of their defense after losing 2/3 of last year's decor. They've gone young. So far, they've done well, but for an opportunity to add a guy like this, you would think they would jump at the opportunity. LeBrun suggests maybe offering a first-round pick and maybe seeing if Nashville would be willing to pick up the remainder of the John Moore contract as well, and maybe have to add a sweetener to do that. If they give a first-round pick and something else and take more off their hands, maybe that's something that Nashville would consider and would work well for Boston. But the fact that they even have their first round pick is good. The first round in the 2021 NHL draft is not going to be as deep. I think teams are going to be more likely and willing to part with those. So for a team like Boston, who again, if they feel like they have a shot to really go for it, it might be a worthwhile option for them. I mean, I know before they had been rumored to include a guy like Vakanainen before as well, earlier in the season when they were rumored to be looking to add a more experienced guy. So the Bruins are a team, when it comes to Ekholm, I think will be front and center and will stand an excellent shot. Whether or not they can move on from the John Moore contract, debatable. I'm not sure Nashville's going to want to do that. But still, the fact that the Bruins have some other assets, including their first, will be a good starting point to talk conversations for well. Now, he also mentions the Washington Capitals, which the team is, to me, like he mentions in the article, which I found a little bit surprising. I don't see a great fit there, but if they're a team might want to stock up and kind of add some extra help, they don't have to. I mean, for example, Zdeno Chara, who former Bruin, is playing on the left side of their defense, but if they wanted to be able to have even more depth, even more veteran leadership there, so that they could maybe have a guy like Chara not necessarily have to play all the time, they could look to add a guy like Ekholm, who would be a terrific fit there and certainly kind of just add even more depth. But at the same time, the Caps are a team that really doesn't need to do that. I'm not sure that they will. I mean, I can see a lot of teams like Washington adding some depth on defense. That's never a bad idea, but this is a bigger ticket item. It's going to cost more money. So even though LeBron mentions them, I can see it being a possibility, but I think your odds are probably low. He also mentions the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, of course, they've been trying to find a way to replace Matt Niskanen since he retired and kind of caught them off guard in the offseason. And clearly that's something they would be interested in doing, but it's going to be a challenge when it comes to cap purposes. And it might be a situation where they might want to swap Shane Gostisbehere. Gostisbehere is a guy who's got a pretty decent contract, slightly more money than Ekholm, but you could argue that Ekholm's been the better player. So that could be a scenario. Maybe Nashville's going to want more than Gostisbehere. I would think that would not be a one-for-one deal. The Flyers have a lot of young, interesting players as well. Maybe a first-round pick or something to that effect in there. It could be a scenario where that could be a partnership that I see. I mean, the only problem with the Philadelphia Flyers, though, is if they're likely going to go with a 7-3-1 concept for the expansion draft, they'd be in a position where they might not be able to protect Ekholm. They give up a good price tag to get him, bring him in, and then have to expose him in expansion just would not make a lot of sense, because you'd have to think that your top 3 defenders that the Flyers are going to have to pick in expansion are going to be Provorov, Sanheim, and likely Philippe Myers. I mean, they could maybe expose Myers, but then they'd be at risk to lose him. Maybe it's not the best time to really add a bigger name like that on the blue line for Philly because of that. So that's certainly something they have to factor in here. So I think maybe it's a possibility, but again, because of that, not really sure there's a great fit there. And of course, you have to think the Winnipeg Jets are a team to consider as well. Ekholm would be an awesome addition to the Jets blue line. They're a team that's still rebuilding that blue line after the mass disruption they saw in the last couple of years. Obviously with Trouba going and Bufflin and several others, like that blue line's been decimated. They do have some solid guys, like Josh Morrissey's been solid for them. Neil Pionk's been a good addition that they got in the Trouba trade. Dylan DeMello, for the most part, has been pretty good. So if they could add another top 4 guy like an Ekholm, that would be a tremendous upgrade for them. It would really give them a much better shot at winning in the playoffs. I think Winnipeg is still a piece or two away from really being a solid contender again, and they can get there. And this could be a guy they could really target to do that. So obviously Nashville and Winnipeg are former rivals, former division, rivals in that sense. So, going back to those divisions next year, Nashville might have to consider that as well. But still, Ekholm's a guy that would make a lot of sense. Maybe they try to move a guy like Matthew Perreault, who's in the final year of his contract. Nashville may not mind taking on guys that are pending UFAs because they don't have to hang on to them long term. Winnipeg still has their first. They have some younger players that could be of interest as well. So I do think they could put together a package to really interest Nashville in that sense. So out of the 4 teams LeBrun mentions, to me, it's down to Boston or Winnipeg with their best opportunities. Of course, in Winnipeg's case, they'd have to have him quarantined for 14 days. So I think if the Jets are going to do that, they likely do it ahead of the deadline a little bit so he can get through that. When you see teams have their week off, because obviously a lot of teams with the schedule are going to have a break, like they usually get like a bye week, that's a good time for them to make trades because they can get a lot of quarantine in without missing as many games. So we'll see what happens, but if Winnipeg's going to do it, I think they would do it sooner than most teams because of being in Canada with the border rule. So we'll see. Let me know what you think is a great fit for Ekholm. Obviously, like I said, he's one of many players on the Predators roster that could very well find themselves wearing a new uniform by the end of the season. Now, I want to talk about the Oilers and the Flames as well. Of course, we saw the Battle of Alberta last night, and that game and the rosters going into it actually generated some conversation pieces. For example, on the Edmonton side, we saw Kyle Turris be a healthy scratch. So that raised some eyebrows. Obviously, we know that he was bought out in Nashville after being traded there from Ottawa in that 3-way deal, which saw Matt Duchene go to the Senators and Turris go to the Predators. He was immediately given a 6-year times $6 million contract, which at the time seemed pretty decent. That was rumored that that's what he wanted out of Ottawa. They wouldn't give it to him. They obviously preferred Duchene over Turris. And at this point, neither one's really lived up to their contracts. I think that's fair to say. But at the same time, Turris was, the better fit in Ottawa for sure. But right now, he's never really found his game to play like he did while he was a Senator. It's kind of odd to think about, really. He played in Nashville. Yes, it was a different system, but he's playing at Edmonton now. Whole different system again, playing with a lot of offensive players. Now, of course, because of the depth in front of him, he was brought in to be a third-line center. They would give him a 2-year deal, obviously, $1.5 million or so. So it's not a big contract, but still a situation where it's not working out early. I mean, he could still rebound and find his game here, but he only has 3 points in 18 games. So, it's difficult to say that this may not work out, and it could be a situation where the Oilers might consider swapping him if they're able to before the deadline to see if they might be able to upgrade that position. I know with guys like himself and Tyson Barrie coming in on somewhat bargain contracts, I thought it was going to be a terrific fit. When the Oilers signed Turris, I was like, yes, that's a great deal for them. He should be able to be a good number 3, takes the pressure off. He's not making as much money, but he's just not finding his game, which is really hard to see. I mean, unfortunately for him, he seems to be a player that's declined a lot in the last couple of years, and he just doesn't quite have it like he used to. So, could Kyle Turris be a guy that's on the move? It seems like he's fallen out of favor of Dave Tippett. The one thing, though, about the signing at Edmonton that was a little bit surprising, if you recall, before Turris ended up in Ottawa, he was originally drafted by the Coyotes and was coached by Dave Tippett, and his lack of playing time, lack of opportunity as a young player is kind of what forced him to want a trade out of there. He requested a deal, and that's how we got to the Senators in the first place. So I was a little bit surprised to see them reunited because they seem to butt heads a lot, even though that was a long time ago. But obviously the second time around has proved to not really be working out for Kyle Turris in Edmonton, and it wouldn't be shocking to see if they found a way to upgrade that position. Now, of course, the other conversation piece that came from that game is Flames forward Sam Bennett. Now, he's been a player that obviously went public through his agent a couple weeks back, talking on Saturday headlines with Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnson that he wants a change of scenery and was looking for a trade. Well, clearly the Flames have not taken well this. Brad Treliving, the GM of the Flames, had a media availability the other day and basically said that he will decide when Sam Bennett is traded or where Sam Bennett plays. And right now he's a Calgary Flame, member of the organization. They see him as being a decent player and he plays for them, and they're not going to feel like they need to be forced to make a trade at all. And I guess they don't really seem to care too much that he requested a trade and wants out of there. Now, obviously, right after that trade request went public, though, they did give him some opportunity on the top line with Gaudreau and Monahan a lot, and he seemed to have some good games. But suddenly, even though he played well, at least I thought he did, he was pulled out of there. Then he's been back in the bottom six ever since. And then last night, he was benched completely for the third period in the last little bit of the second. So that's raising a lot of eyebrows, wondering if maybe the coach was told not to play him because maybe they were getting close to making a trade. Well, obviously we're, a full day later. There's been no news on a trade, so I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind that. We don't really have any think this for sure to say that there was a trade getting close or anything of that nature. When Jeff Ward was asked about it in his post-game interview, he just said that would be kept internal. Wasn't going to talk about it. So we really don't know what his rationale was for benching Sam Bennett. So the fact that he was, wanting a trade, get an opportunity to move up right after that came public, and then suddenly drop down to the bottom six, and then after that being benched, that's just not going to go well. Many people think that a trade's getting closer and closer, and that Brad Treliving and the Flames are not going to have any choice but to do something. Now, the other part of this is that the Flames again lost the game and had another inconsistent effort out there, and there's a lot of people calling for change in Calgary, and obviously Treliving made a lot of comments regarding all the other players, and he really didn't have a lot of bad to say. He did say they were an inconsistent team, but as far as players not caring or not wanting to win and all that, he totally downplayed all that. I know there's been some narrative about that in the media as well, but difficult to say. I think the Flames need to do something to shake things up, because clearly they're not a consistent team. They're not getting a consistent effort. I have to question a little bit the leadership on the ice as well. Have to question a little bit of the coaching. I'm not sure it's the coach, though. I don't think it's fair to say it's all on Jeff Ward. A lot of it's on the players, but it's just something's got to give there. And a Bennett deal, it seems to be something that's been brewing. And after last night's benching, you have to think maybe something is getting close to coming to fruition there. So let me know your thoughts. Where's a good landing spot for Sam Bennett? Will the Flames finally pull the trigger here after what's transpired in the last few days? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.